I will now invite the next speaker to please give us the opening keynote address. He is a Minister of Mine, the Minister of Electricity and Energy for the Republic of South Africa. Please help me warmly welcome to stage Minister Kgosientsho Ramokgopa.
So, don't mind my walk. I'm a prolific footballer, so the opposition targeted me. So once you take me out, then you have increased your prospects of winning. So thank you very much, Program Director. Let me also take the opportunity to extend my warm and sincere greeting to Mr. Al-Shirawi, the Secretary General of the IEF, honorable ministers and deputy ministers that are here, industry leaders and CEOs that are part of this conversation, your esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for making time. I thought that I must take this opportunity just to share with you our presidency of the G20 and what constitute, if you like, our priority areas of discussion. I'm very happy that we canvass these priority areas with fellow ministers on the continent. Much earlier this year, we did occasion an opportunity for us to have a conversation and see if there's a degree of alignment in what constitute the priorities for the Energy Technical Working Group. The President has made it very public that we see the G20 once in a two-decade opportunity to come to Africa as a platform for us to surface and foreground the energy complex on the continent and the opportunities that lie therein. So this is Africa's G20. We just happen to be the sovereign nation, the only sovereign country on the continent that's a member of the G20, but we thought that it's important that we are able to use this august platform, not just to surface and foreground the issues, but also to agitate for, if you like, greater levels of action. So we have landed at three priorities. The first one is on the energy security. Those of you are following conversations around the issues in the energy complex and the issues of climate change. You know that the industrialized world have coined this thing called the energy trilemma. So they say that the conversation should be about energy security, should be about access, and should also about be sustainability. Our view is that we should be talking about the quadrilemma because on the continent, we need to take into account, if you like, the socio-economic impacts of the transition. So if you look at the industrialized North, they've been able to industrialize on the back of fossil fuels, and now it is our time to industrialize, and then there's a new conversation around moving from fossil fuels to other energy sources. And of course, we are well endowed with what is characterized as fossil fuel. So our view is that in that totality of the conversation, it is important that they were able to place the socioeconomic impact of this transition as part of the mainstay of the conversation. So it is an inseparable conversation to the issues of decarbonization. So it's indivisible. So that's the argument that we are making. And then we're talking about just, affordable, and inclusive energy transitions. The S is important at the end. It is important because it is our view that there's no universal definition of what constitutes a transition. It's a function of your domestic conditions. So it must be nuanced. They take into account what your sovereign ambitions are, take into account what constitute your endowments, whilst balancing that with your obligations to ensure that we reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. And a big part of our conversation on the continent is around the African interconnectivity. I'll expand a bit more on that. We've got a number of, if you like, regional power pools. I think there's a pristine opportunity there If you ask me, it's a low-hanging fruit. Of course, we must be able to package financing to support the expansion and modernization of that infrastructure. For our sins in the country, we announced just a month ago the modernization and expansion of our transmission network by 14,000 kilometers. It's about 25 billion US dollar investment, and I'm happy to say that we have received a number of, if you like, proposals. So if you like, the program is oversubscribed. So there's an insatiable appetite on the part of the private sector to participate in the expansion and modernization of this transmission. And I'll tell you about the bespoke financing instruments that we have designed to support the program itself. So for priority number one, for each priority, we say there are issues that constitute what we call negotiated outcomes. So we'll invest a lot of energy and time to ensure that there's a degree of consensus. So there's a statement that comes out of the G20 in relation to first the energy security. And there on the energy security, we're talking about a framework that is meant to address energy security risks whilst considering diversification of energy sources. So energy agnostic with regards to the technologies, like I said, I think the conversation must take into account our own unique set of circumstances, so it should not be imposed. It must be domesticated to our own conditions. And then the point that the program director was raising, or in fact is the SG of the IEF, is the issues around clean cooking gap. So we know that there's about 500,000 premature deaths on the continent as a result of cooking methods that are hazardous, if you like, to the health of many people across the length and breadth of the country, of the continent rather. And of course, the stats that are bandied around is that over 600 million people on the continent don't have access to electricity. It's a significant number of the 1.4 billion that lives on the continent. So I think there's a need for us to be able to put together a very credible and robust infrastructure investment action plan. I emphasize action plan. We have lamented what the problems are, so I think we have defined the problem statement ad nauseum. I think it's important that we are able to transition and get to a point of doing. I think part of the problems we sit with, of course, is more acute on the continent, is that we are seeking for a perfect solution. There is no such, there's no perfect solution. I think the point is to start and accept that as we do, we are going to make mistakes, and we must learn and unlearn from those mistakes. And then the other issue that we're going to invest a lot of time on is on the issues of what we call the affordability framework. So one of the key issues that are beginning to emerge, it's a new manifestations of energy inequality on the continent and of course in the globe, is the issue of electricity or energy that is not affordable. So we must invest a significant amount of time in ensuring that we are able to arrive at a situation where, as we put it there, to design a global energy poverty compact to ensure that we support access to affordable and modern day energy. So we're making the point modern day energy because you don't necessarily have to invest in backbone infrastructure that makes the unit cost of connectivity and therefore the cost of electricity unaffordable. I think there's significant progress that has been made on the technology front to use new sources of energy for us to be able to ensure that we are able to democratize access to electricity on the continent. Priority number 2 is just, inclusive energy transition. The just is very important because I think it's significant to make the point that we don't want to leave anyone behind. So on the back of the decarbonization and the industrial prospects of the decarbonization, that we are able to industrialize. So if you had to take our South Africa as an example, we're able to industrialize on the back of fossil fuels. It plateaued, tapered down. We have an opportunity to reindustrialize, and we think we can reindustrialize on the back of what I refer to as a battery economy. We are all on the continent well endowed with the mineral complex that are going to undergate the transition. So I think it's important the issues of beneficiating at source must be part of the conversation, but they are also resource hungry. You need water, you need electricity for that to happen. And that's why it's important that it's not necessarily a given that you'll be able to industrialize closer to source. You must resolve all other questions that are a precondition for you to be able to industrialize. And then there are also future energy sources. We think that green hydrogen holds a huge potential, green ammonia. Of course, you must resolve the cost element. Now it's about $2 per kilogram. If you had to ask those who are in this space, if you had to reach levels just below $1 per kilogram, then you are in the game. Of course, science and technology will resolve that. But what science and technology won't resolve is the fact that we have location advantage, the huge amount of real estate that is not competing with other commercial uses. If you had to do an irradiation atlas, you'll find that the good quality sun is found on the continent. The corridor, South Africa to Namibia, is a perfect example of that. And that's why there's that collaboration with our Namibian brothers and sisters to ensure that we are able to elevate our role and place in the green hydrogen complex. And of course, Europe is prepared to pay a premium now for purposes for off-taking. So there's market that exists. The Japanese have found technology of co-firing ammonia with coal. You are able to reduce the NOxes and SOxes, your emissions, and therefore you are able to exploit your own endowments. In our instance, then we can continue to burn coal without compromising the lived experiences of the people in the immediate vicinity of the footprint of the coal-fired power stations. And then we're advocating for a G20 action agenda for affordable and inclusive transitions. And we think that that must be based on science and evidence. Earlier on, I was having a discussion with the SG of the IEF and making the point that policy choices must be derived from evidence. So it must be evidence-led. So it can't be, we must remove emotions from the conversations and ensure that we're able to locate the role of science in the policy choices that we're making, because it makes it more credible, a bit more robust. So we think that there's a whole range of body of work that has been done by research organizations, universities, constellations of those, and you are able to synthesize. We can be able to arrive at a handbook that can be used as a template on how you are going to achieve this affordable, inclusive transition. It's not an imposition, it's derived from science. Of course, like I said, you'll still locate your own domestic nuances. And then the third and last priority is on Africa's interconnectivity and power pools. We think that there has to be some degree of policy harmonization to ensure that we support cross-border energy trade. So it's going to be particularly unhelpful when our policy articulations are incongruous. So there must be some degree of policy symmetry, and in that way then we see this complex as an indivisible, if you like, opportunity that exists on the continent. So we think that working together and collaborating, we can arrive at a place where we are able to generate a booklet of what constitute the best practices on policy harmonization. What constitute best practices? So you are not necessarily requested to be religiously, if you like, attached to that, but simply say these are the experiences across other regions and jurisdictions. And more significantly, we want to design a 10-year infrastructure investment plan to support the power systems in relation to interconnectivity and the realization of Africa's single electricity market. So that will be a height of folly for as long as you have not resolved the issues of policy harmonization and how you are going to support the investments in relation to this 10-year infrastructure investment plan. So we do make the point of what should constitute some of these objectives. Like I said, continental integration is very important. Energy security, a key part of the conversation, what I termed as the energy quadrilemma. It requires that kind of, if you like, consideration. And then the other one is the issues around private sector participation. So the balance sheet of sovereign countries will not be sufficient to support the kind of investments that is required. I mean, just to use South Africa as an example, what we launched a month ago, we need 25 billion US dollars. Of course, the sovereign matrix deteriorated over time, but of course we need to allocate this capital to other social infrastructure. But we know that there's a big liquidity that is sitting with the depth of liquidity sitting with the private sector can make it possible for the private sector to participate for as long as the conditions are right, and by conditions I mean policy certainty, predictability, the issues around the financial markets, the maturity of financial markets, the track record on delivering on projects. I think it's a big part of the conversation. And in our instance, we design a credit guarantee vehicle, which is a backstop for investment. So we are not going to burden the sovereign balance sheet. We design an instrument working with the market players on the financial side to design an instrument that is acceptable to them. And in that way, they know that their investments are protected. And that's why we are rolling out a 25 billion US dollar program. And like I said, it's oversubscribed. So we are confident of achieving that ambition. That's one example. I'm sure I can go to another country, we've got another example, and then we can achieve a lot of those. And in conclusion, the point we're making here is that we are not adventurous. So there's a discipline on how we are organized. So the African Union, if you like, is an overarching body that brings us together. So it's important that whatever work we are doing in our own little corners, sovereign jurisdiction must be in support of the bigger Africa agenda. So if you had to take what the priorities for the G20 are, the 10-year infrastructure investment plan on regional interconnectivity, they are going to support what Agenda 2063 is saying. So we are giving life, we are breathing life into Agenda 2063. So we've gone to town to explain what really is required for us to transition. The point is, as a point of self-criticism, self-critique rather, is that we have lamented the problem statement. The point is to do. We must get to a point of doing. And I think we are short of doing. So we have not perfected the art of doing, and my view is that let's get to that point where we get to realize things. I make the point that the crisis that is faced by the continent, the opportunities lies in that crisis, but that crisis is not, there's no infinite window. We must take these opportunities within the life of that crisis, and it's something that we have not done very well as a continent. So I think let's get to a point of not define the problem statement, but get to actual doing. So we design what the value chain that should be familiar to all of you. And then we do make the point, the opportunities. So we go to each and every power pool. What are these opportunities? Which of these projects are ready? So that we go to those low-hanging projects. So you can go to any region of the continent. We are beginning to map what those are. And the point is that we must get to a point where we have an appreciation of those projects that are ready, and let's proceed with those projects. So what do we know in conclusion? 19 projects at an advanced stage, about $6 billion US dollars. That's the financing that is required. We know there's about 5 projects across those power pools. So 5 projects with completed feasibility studies. Of course, they require additional investments for them to get to a stage where they are investment ready, and then, if you like, shovel ready. And there are now about 28 projects that they requires project preparation support. And that's why that relationship with the financing and funding institutions are important, especially your DFIs. They are prepared to take the hit upfront or upstream of the project life cycle. So we are advocating that if we're to do all of these things, then we get to a stage where we begin to realize the opportunities that are inherent in the this 10-year investment program that we are advocating for. And then we also define what are the roles of some of these institutions and what will be the key enablers, what sits on the critical path. If those things are not required, then we can kiss goodbye the opportunities that are before us. So really we want to wish you well, and like I said, I mean the G20, this is Africa's G20, Mission 300, there will be a voice there. We have agreed, we're in Tanzania, most of us agreed on the issues around Mission 300. Agenda 2063 makes the point about the 10-year investment plan. We do articulate what the maturity of those projects are. So the point is that Africa's time is now, and Africa must take the opportunity now. Capital is very mobile, it's going to find opportunities somewhere. So we are not the anointed ones. So we are competing with other regions. And as long as we can organize ourselves better and ensure that there's policy harmonization, we can go further together. So thank you very much for the opportunity.